Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon with my distinguished visitor from India, Prakash Munshi, who is the founder of Citizens for Tomorrow, an organization that is galvanizing the 1.3 billion population of India into taking concerted actions now to reduce exposures to cell phones and cell towers. I'm also with Theodora Scarato, the Executive Director of Environmental Health Trust. I'm going to introduce the conversation, and then the two of them are going to discuss the remarkable things that have been happening in India and what the context of what is going on in the United States today. As many of you may not be aware, the U.S. National Toxicology Program just last month reviewed all of the information of the bioassay on cell phones that was conducted, the $25 million study, the largest ever done by the flagship institution of the U.S. government. And something very unusual happened. In the 40-year history of the National Toxicology Program, there has never been a 3-day review of a single agent that has been tested in that program. And yet, because of the importance of this issue, the government held an unprecedented review of the results of the bioassay. And that results are not fully available to the public, but we're pleased to discuss them here today. They can be found on our website as a summary from the National Toxicology Program of what those findings were. And they included the following. While the draft report in 2016 and 17 indicated that there was some evidence of malignant schwannoma of the heart, a very rare and highly malignant tumor, the advisors decided that that should be upgraded to clear evidence of cancer in this rare tumor on the nerve inside the heart. Now, the implications of this are considerable because humans are already showing up with the same type of tumor, not a malignancy, but in the hearing nerve called an acoustic neuroma, and a schwannoma and neuroma are a thickening of Schwann cells around a nerve. In addition, they decided that the evidence with respect to glioma, a malignant tumor of the brain, which is very rare in rats, should be upgraded from equivocal to some evidence of cancer. In addition, the reviewers looked at other tumors that had been found to be in excess in the National Toxicology Program review. And what they found was increased tumors of the adrenal medulla, indicating that that was some evidence of cancer in the adrenal glands, as well as significant increase in damage to the heart tissue, cardiomyopathy.
Scattered throughout here. This was pretty typical of what we saw in this study for cardiomyopathy in the right ventricle. Obviously, some of the lesions were more extensive and extended farther down into the myocardium. Other animals had more foci, but this was fairly typical of what we saw.
Now, these are important findings because, of course, many people are keeping their phones on their body. And we know from French government tests that have recently been released by the agency that for the French government does national testing of phones, that when phones are kept close to the body, they exceed the European standards and they can exceed the US standards. So what we are concerned about today is that we have clear evidence on some cancers from the National Toxicology Program. And in the meantime, because of the difficulties that the US government faces today, the FDA is making no change in what they are advising people yet. I was told by the director of the FDA's program on devices and radiologic health that they're not going to be able to change their website until June because they're updating their website. I would actually think that that is something they ought to rethink in light of these findings, because what we know is that around the world, hundreds of millions of children and young people are using phones and completely unaware that when phones are kept close to the body, they exceed current test limits. And when towers are measured, as Mr. Munshi will tell you, the emissions from them are not measured relevant to where people are located. So we need to be concerned. One final thing, when it comes to cancer, which is a disease with a long latency and many causes, one of the things that we know is a predictor of cancer is damage to DNA, the exquisite thing that programs all of our responses to cell damage and cell repair within our bodies. And what the NTP revealed is significant evidence of DNA damage in both mice and rats in multiple organs that were involved. So we are concerned now, and we are pleased to have this conversation with Ms. Scarato, Mr. Munshi, and I leave you to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
For more information, I should add that you should look at our website, where all of the NTP reports that are currently available to the public have been posted as well, because our colleagues at the National Toxicology Program have really not had sufficient time to prepare all of the materials in a way that is accessible to all of those with various visual and hearing handicaps. So we've made them available to those of you who can look at them at ehtrust.org, and we will put links up on our website as well on our Facebook post. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah, for the introduction.
Great. Well, I'm so thankful to have you here in Washington, D.C., and to be able to talk with you about what's happening in India. You are part of Citizens for Tomorrow. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, Citizens for Tomorrow is an initiative of famous Bollywood star Juhi Chawla, who was also the Miss India earlier in 2000. I don't know which year, sorry. But she has been a powerful force for Citizens for Tomorrow, being a celebrity.
Citizens for Tomorrow is dedicated to the children.
The main two causes which she has just now are reduced EMF radiation, which we started in 2010, and reduced plastic pollution, which we have started last year. We have achieved big strides since we have started these two causes, and in creating awareness amongst the citizens, the politicians, and also students of colleges, schools, so that they are aware of the harm it can cause. The technology is wonderful, but we have to take precautions. We're not saying throw out the technology, but we have to take precautions. We have to do the necessary studies before introducing any new technology like 5G. Like 4G came with double the power in India. The power transmitted by the antenna in India for 4G was 40 watts. For the others, it's 20 watts. And what I heard from one Dr. Vijayalakshmi, that in US, it's only 1 watt or 2 watts. So why should we have such high power transmission in India?
Not only do you have PSAs, like public service announcements, but there are presentations you've been doing across India.
Yes.
And my goodness, newspaper and articles about the work that you're doing. And most recently, Juhi Chawla received the Indira Gandhi Memorial Award for social awareness on cell tower and cell phone radiation. And I wonder if you could tell us about that as well. I know you were up there with her. And we have a video on our YouTube channel as well as on our page. There's a policy page on India, and you can see the video of her receiving that award, and many videos of you as well. So.
And that is why it is important. It is very important because it is going to affect everybody. It is going to affect everybody, the men and the women, the children and the old, the rich and the poor, the people in the city and the people in the villages. And not just all of us. This radiation, which was not there 15, 20 years ago, is going to also affect our environment, our birds, our bees, our flowers, our farming.
So these people, the industry, always want proof of harm. Now, if there was no harm, why would these organizations, which are political parties, the two leading of them in India, give an award to Juhi Chawla for creating social awareness on health hazards from mobile towers? The first one, as you said, was Indira Gandhi Memorial Award in 2017 for this. And that was basically handed over by the ex-speaker of the earlier government, Meera Kumar, to her. Yes, she did bring me on stage at that time, as she is so humble and nice. She said, no, you have to come up. I said, okay. The second one which she got was the Priyadarshini Academy Award, which was handed over by the current minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, to her. So two separate political parties leading in India are fully aware of the work we are doing, and therefore they are fully aware of the harm EMF radiation does to the citizens of India.
Mm-hmm. And you told me that the Prime Minister actually made a statement about this, where the Prime Minister made a statement about electromagnetic radiation.
You see, the Prime Minister of India, Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat State, has mentioned in a message to Ms. Pandey, author of the radiation threat, and he has mentioned in that message very clearly that microwaves and radiation through mobile towers have proved killers to the birds and creatures. Are we not creatures? Theo?
Right.
So therefore, it is also a threat to us. So presently, the current government is only looking at digital highway, without seeing what harm this digital highway can do to the citizens in terms of Wi-Fi hotspots, in terms of 4G at high speed, and forthcoming in the coming years, 5G will come in. But there are no studies which have been done.
I noticed you also had, the India government has an inter-ministerial report, and also a report on birds and impacts to wildlife that does show harm. In fact, their studies have been statistically looked at as to how many showed effects, how many didn't, and as I recall, the majority showed effects. And the Indian scientists are actually done a lot of research on bees and wildlife as well.
The Interministerial Committee was formed in 2010-2011, just at the time when Juhi started this campaign of creating awareness for health hazards from mobile phones and mobile towers. But the Interministerial Committee invited only the industry to participate. The citizens were not invited. The industry suggested bring down the radiation norms or standards to 10% of what was existing.
Well, this is our special focus on cell phone radiation. The government's new norms for mobile phone towers come into effect from today. These are as per the recommendations of the Interministerial Committee comprising of the Department of Telecom, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Environment and Forest, Department of Biotechnology and Indian Council of Medical Research. This committee was set up in August 2010 for studying radiation from cellular towers and mobile handsets. The new regulations regarding radiation emissions from cellular towers and mobile phones come into effect from today, making India one among the few countries in the world to have stringent electromagnetic frequency radiation standards. Well, in the interest of public health, the Indian standards are now 10 times more stringent than over 90% of the countries. The EMF exposure limit for base station emissions has been lowered to 1/10 of the existing level. To ensure that these norms are followed, Telecom Enforcement Resource and Monitoring will conduct random audits of the self-certification furnished by the service providers. A penalty of ₹5 lakh is liable to be levied on the telecom service provider running the mobile tower for non-compliance with the EMF standards. Now, the new regulations also set standards for mobile phone handsets. The regulations are made to safeguard against the electromagnetic fields generated and which are basically absorbed by the human body, measured by specific absorption rate or SAR. As per the IMC report, the Department of Telecom had announced that Indian mobile handset makers and importers will have to ensure all sets comply with SAR limit of 1.6 watt per kilogram and phase out all non-complying ones by August next year. All new mobile phones that will be sold in Indian markets ought to have the SAR level mentioned on the packaging. But Is the government taking all of this seriously? Let's take a look at what's been happening in Rajasthan. Well, 10 days ago, the Rajasthan High Court ordered the state government to ensure that all mobile phone towers actually in and around areas and schools, hospitals and densely populated localities be pulled down. The Rajasthan government is yet to implement this order, and the deadline, of course, has expired for the same. The serious concerns really over the possible health hazards from these mobile phone towers. And we at NewsX have been pursuing the story since quite some time, and we've been hoping that the government takes note of the same. Well, I actually covered a report, got this report for you earlier this June, highlighting the perils of mobile phone radiation and how norms were being easily flouted, and that too in the national capital. Take a look. Right behind me is a residential colony in South Delhi, and if you can look at that particular residential building, it has not one or two but three cell phone towers on top of it. Right off that particular building is the Safdarjung Hospital and also the AIIMS Hospital. Right below it in the visuals that you can see is a cancer home for cancer patients.
Yes, there is no doubt that electromagnetic radiation from instruments like cell phones or even mobile towers in thickly populated vicinity pose a risk to harmless individuals across this country. It has been clearly proven that things like dizziness, headache, anxiety, ringing in the ears, acoustic neuromas, which are benign tumors arising from the inner ear nerves, auditory nerves, next to the base of the brain, and even other tumors, meningiomas and gliomas arising in the brain, owe their incidence, owe their occurrence to radiation which is unbridled. Now, yes, there have been studies across the world which have said that in fact this happens, but there have been studies which have also said that no, a clear link has not been proven. I wish that a large study conducted across the globe from various countries, amongst various races, amongst various sexes, and amongst various age groups is conducted, which finally puts to rest this controversy, because there are people coming out from all sides. But let me make out a distinction here between radiation that would emanate from excessive cell phone usage to the individual, and in fact much more harmful would be what I would label these mobile towers, which are mushrooming in thickly populated, unprotected populations in this country.
Right.
I think this one needs to be looked at fast enough, and I wish that Mr. Kasliwal or some other legal bodies actually took up this issue unless a huge compensation is awarded in such a case by the courts in our country. Believe me, it is not going to knock any bottoms. That is when it starts happening. That is when people start thinking, because the courts, the legal procedures, they all need to come. That's how it happened for smoking. That's what it happened. That is how, if you trace the entire history of smoking throughout the world, people have been against banning smoking or against these cigarette companies sort of mushrooming and advertising for years. And only when huge awards against major multinational tobacco companies started appearing, that is when people started taking this seriously. And I strongly wish, now here in front of you is a case in question with Mr. Kasliwal, where so many of his own family have, including the animals from it, which is part of his extended family, have succumbed to this dreadful disease. And I wish that he goes to the court, knocks the doors of the court in India, and I wish that the justice there is delivered and an award is given, so that it sends a strong message to the regulatory authorities that they need to do something about it soon enough.
And they were brought down.
Now,
India reduced.
But my point is, they reduced it based on industries' suggestion.
Because it's still not safe. It's still
That
harmful.
is the point which I'm trying to make. That on a TV channel, NDTV, the ex-secretary of Department of Telecommunications, Government of India, has mentioned very clearly that 95% of the antennae or mobile towers were already below the reduced rate. So therefore, we said, then this reduction is a total eyewash. You get what I mean?
Yes, I do, because, I mean, here in the United States, the LA School District uses a quote-unquote a precautionary limit of 10,000 times less than FCC, and as I understand it, there's harm shown even far lower than that. So 1/10 is it's a start, but there's a lot farther.
But that's
that the
what they
government
are
can
saying,
go.
that 95% of the antennae were below the 10%
Right.
reduction.
Right.
But are we interested in the norms or the standards, or are we interested in the actual radiation level the citizen is facing?
Can you tell me about how you were telling me last night about how in India, in the cities, you will have a lot of tall buildings and there'll be antennas hanging off one building, and then right next door, just in line of sight to these antennas, will be people's homes and flats. So they will be in the highest, the main beam of the tower. Could you tell me about that? Because that is what's happening. That's what is happening with the
See,
deployment.
we are not happy with the Department of Telecommunications and their monitoring agencies, whom I have visited twice. I have asked them, tell me, from where do you measure?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you measure?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No answer.
Mm-hmm.
So they are keeping quiet. Means they don't want to tell me, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But we are interested to know the actual radiation level from the residence of the man who is suffering. It can be 5 feet away, 10 feet away.
5 feet away from antennas?
Yes, 5 feet away, 10 feet away from the antennas.
That's too close.
And that's not one antenna, Theo. There can be a cluster of 5. Now, we have a building where I took the DOT Director General and showed him that these 5 antennas are facing this building at 7 meters distance, while your regulation says 5 antennas should be at a distance of 50 meters.
Mm.
So where is the sanctity of this regulation?
Mm-hmm. So, like in the United States, where we don't have much regulatory oversight when antennas are built or checking, there's a similar situation where you're asking for questions and you're not getting answers. You know, I'd also add the way that this radiation is measured by governments, probably official, when you get official readings, is they're looking at averaging, whereas the transmission is pulsing. Then you average that, you're going to get a much lower number than if you measure that peak pulse that you're getting in millisecond bursts. And so these numbers that we're seeing, I know in the United States when we get numbers, they're really not appropriate to understanding the impact on people because it's averaged. Of course, we know average is going to minimize the peak.
I agree with you to that extent. And Deborah had also given in a presentation in India about the pulsed radiation with a lovely. And she has also mentioned in her book, The Disconnect, which in fact we got it printed in India during a visit. And the foreword was written by Juhi.
Oh, right.
So,
right.
And that was a big success for us whenever we went around for presentations. The book was very much appreciated and people took copies of those. But the main thing, as what we were chatting, was that the actual radiation level is more important than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Meaning if you're down, if you take a measurement when you're at the bottom of the building, you're going to get a different measure,ment
100%.
Than the person
staying at 5 meters away or 5 feet away.
And you said that there's cases of people having cancer
Correct.
who are in the building
opposite
where the antenna is.
There have been 5 cases or 6 cases in a building called Usha Kiran, and the ex-CEO of Union Carbide, Dr. Gupta's wife, got cancer. And they were in the main beam. Because, you know, beam goes like this and like this. And 5 stories, people got cancer. And these are all ladies. Because the ladies stay more in house in India, just like in Israel. So these 5 ladies suffered. Then they took it up with the opposite building that please look at these cases. We want this out. And they got it removed. Not only did they get it removed, but they got the buildings on the street sign affidavits that we will not put it up.
So they were able to remove the antennas that were facing their apartments.
Exactly. But after getting cancer and people died. So what's the use of saying it, doing it after the people's died? You see, and the radiation can be reduced or increased by the service providers themselves, sitting remotely in their office. If I'm going to go and measure it and they come to know, they'll reduce the power. As you know, the radiation level is directly proportional to the power. They cannot do anything to the distance between the antenna and my building.
But they can reduce
the power. The moment they reduce the power, the radiation level goes down. And if I complain of no proper connectivity or call drops, and call drops are caused by many reasons, not only the power transmission, and that they will increase the power and say, my man is coming to your site and he will rectify the situation. The man does not come. They just increase the power. And then the problem is solved. So it is very important for the people to know how is radiation measured, what is radiation, and how it hurts you.
Right, that's right. And you've been doing presentations all over India on
yes, Juhi and myself, we have gone all over India in giving these presentations to schools, colleges, newspaper houses, and also to lawyers, together with, when Theodora also had visited India, we had gone over to the ministries.
Oh, you had?
Yes, we had given to the ministries, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Environment, but all deaf ears.
Well, wait, actually, but your Ministry of Health and your government still puts out recommendations on how to reduce exposure. They have, I think it's 10 to 12, I think it was 12 and then it went to 10 recommendations that they say on this big poster that was an advertisement to keep the phone away from your head, to use a wired phone, to reduce your exposure to this radiation from phones. So those are the official recommendations. And it doesn't say, if you are worried, it says, we recommend that you take these steps to reduce exposure. That's the government of India.
I fully agree that the Department of Telecommunications of Government of India have said in half-page advertisements, and it costs a hell of a lot in national dailies, that if you have a choice, use a landline into bracket wired. So don't use a mobile phone, use a landline. Why would they say it?
Why would they say it?
Correct?
They do say that very clearly in their recommendations to the public. Yep. Why would they say it? And then you know, another thing I would mention, one, I'm really glad that your government is talking about corded phones as well as cell phones, because a lot of people aren't aware that home phones, which are cordless, like your decked phones, they emit a lot of radiation, the base as well as the handset. And I know I run into a lot of people who have these decked phone bases literally, you know, by their bed all night long, exposing them to radio frequency radiation. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I had another question. There's some locations in India, some jurisdictions, where they've removed cell towers from schools, like Zila,
Zilla Parishad.
Yes, and the state of Rajasthan.
Yes.
Can you tell me about schools and cell towers and what they've done?
You see, as you know, and even it's written in Deborah's book, that children are more prone to be affected by the radiation because of the soft skull. As the child develops, he has a harder skull. So the parents, after reading about all these things in the schools, they say, we don't want mobile towers close to us. We don't want it on our head also. And that is why the protests came from Rajasthan. The Rajasthan High Court, the citizens won the case, led by one Kasliwal family, whose two brothers had cancer, an identical cancer, and also their dog died because of an identical cancer.
Really?
Yes, and
they lived in
that tower was 5 meters or 7 meters away from their house. Can you believe it?
Wow. And the dog and the two
brothers who had bedrooms facing the entry.
Wow.
So it is obvious, and everybody knows about it, that radiation from mobile tower antennae is harmful. Everybody's, what do you call it? Resistance levels are different. I might get it in 1 month, you might get it in 2 years, somebody else will get it 5 years. But the main thing is, why does the Cellular Operators Association of India Director General stay half a kilometer away from the nearest mobile tower? Is he scared of something affecting him? In the same program of NDTV, Dr. Harsh Mahajan, who has been awarded the Padma Shri by the President of India, mentioned, he's a radiologist. He mentioned, I will not stay in front of the mobile tower. Now why?
Oh, he did.
He did, and it's there on record.
With Rajan Matthews, you represent the Cellular Operators Association of India, and the last time I had you on this show many years ago, I asked you, if you lived in a house and there was a cell phone tower opposite you at a height, would you be scared?
Absolutely not. I, in fact, have a cell tower not too far away.
How far?
How far? Probably half a kilometer away from where I am. I have.
That's not the same thing as looking out of your window and having.
Dr. Mahajan, would you live near a tower?
No, just a minute. As I mentioned earlier,
prefer staying away, man.
See, that is why everybody wants to stay away.
On the TV.
And that's all on, you have a YouTube channel.
I have a YouTube channel called Reduce EMF Radiation,
which you can go on and watch these videos that you've uploaded.
Yes.
And more. Yeah. That is a good question about why they don't want to live near the towers. So now that the National Toxicology Program has found clear evidence in the male rats of these cancers, and in addition, the Ramazzini study, which found the same kind of cancers in terms of the schwannomas of the heart in their male rats at much lower levels. What are the next steps? Because the Indian government, what are they going to be doing with this information that shows that this radiation causes cancer?
According to me, this government is blinded totally. They want to achieve digital highway at all costs. They have earned a lot of money from the cellular industry by selling the spectrum. They will earn a lot if they make profits in terms of income tax. You think that they will do anything at all for the citizens of India? And we have a 1.2 billion or 1.3 billion population. This will become another question like a family control program. People will die and they will not bother. The other thing is that we are very skeptical of this government. They don't reply to our letters. When we go for meetings, they say, okay, you want to know from where this was measured? They send me an email with 70 pages and they want me as a 72-year-old man to try and hunt. Where is that, how they measure? Is this the way to treat senior citizens by the government? So they don't reply for weeks, months.
When you ask questions to them.
And they give vague replies. Even a parliamentarian, when he asked a question on radiation, in 2014, when the government took over, they replied to him giving that there is no harm from a World Health Organization 2006 paper. But in 2014, they did not tell him that in 2011, May 31st, the WHO had classified EMF radiation as possibly carcinogenic.
Yeah, that too.
Why do you hide such information?
That 2006 WHO, which is by the EMF project, which was started with funding by industry funneled through a hospital, that is often brought forward, and that's from 2006. And I can't tell you how many times I've received that paper as proof of safety, and I've said, wow, that's a 12-year-old document that really doesn't have bearing on what we're talking about today or of the breadth of research that we have at this time. But so it sounds like what's happening, because in a lot of ways what India is doing is far supersedes what the United States is doing, right? India has recommendations on how to reduce exposure with full-page ads in the newspaper for the public.
By the government.
By the government. Whereas in the United States, we say, if you are worried, that's what the American people are told, that if we are worried, here's how you can reduce exposure. And we're given like 3 tips, maybe. So, but in the statewide, state of California
is very
issued recommendations, which were watered down. They started about a decade ago and have been watered down. And I would urge everyone to go to the Environmental Health Trust and look at the California State Department of Health recommendations on cell phones and read a little bit about the history. Connecticut Department of Health, the Maryland State Advisory Council on Children and Environmental Health Protection has issued recommendations on how to reduce exposure to children in schools. Like whenever you build new, putting in wired connections, like we're using right now, a wired internet rather than wireless. And also, how to reduce exposure in the school setting, because that's a really big concern that we have, and I know your group also has raised. But at the state level in India, there is a lot happening, and there's videos that Mr. Munshi has posted of towers being taken down by citizens, of protests in the city with all of these people and talks. Tell me a little bit about that. And then we're going to talk about 5G next. So.
See, we have already written to the government about 5G, but if they don't do, first of all, something about 4G, what will they do about 5G? 5G, there is a government, IIT Delhi, I've just read today that IIT Delhi is going to conduct a study and it will be out within the next 5 years.
5 years on what?
On 5G, how to get it done without any harm to citizens. It is very easy to mention things like this, but I don't agree with them at all. In fact, as soon as I get back to India, I'm going to call up this gentleman from IIT Delhi to find out and give my impressions and impressions from USA of yours and Deborah Davis and others that 5G is a total suicide.
Yes, would say that we are very concerned about 5G for so many reasons, and I can't imagine how it can be done safely in light of the research that we already have showing 2G, 3G, and 4G are harmful to our health, cause cancer, which is only one of the pieces. There's actually many other health effects, damage to the immune system, to reproductive system, have been found in numerous peer-reviewed and published papers. And 5G is going to incorporate higher frequencies, the millimeter and submillimeter frequencies that are used. They're used by our government in crowd control. In fact, they were brought to Afghanistan to test these crowd control weapons that use that kind of frequency. And there's research just published, which is on our website on 5G, about how the millimeter waves and the submillimeter waves interact with our skin in a unique way with our sweat glands, causing them to become helical antennas. And there are respected scientists around the world and in Israel who published this paper, Dr. Feldman and Paul Ben-Ishai, about, we know there are biological impacts and that the skin is going to be the most affected. It is our largest organ. And, how can we roll this out onto people in India, in the United States, when we already have proof of harm at this point? And as was stated at the National Toxicology Program study, when there was a review just about 2 weeks ago, at this point, all new technologies must be properly tested for long-term safety on children, on adults, on the medically fragile, before we roll anything new out. And that was never even done with what we have now.
In terms of what this means then for 5G, is that the assumption still exists. There's no reason to believe that there is an effect. That's why this study is so important. It says the null hypothesis has been disproven. Therefore, if we're going to roll out new technologies, shouldn't we know whether there are health effects before exposing the general population?
And this 5-year study you're talking about is not going to be enough.
I fully agree with you. Now, if you're introducing a pharmaceutical into the market,
right,
how many years it takes for tests to be conducted in laboratories to prove that it is a safe product? Why was it not done also for EMF radiation? Maybe you started first compared to India or Europe. Why was it not done? Is it because of the nexus with the industry and the government and the WHO? Because the ICNIRP chief at that time, Michael Rapacholi, was moved specially for this so that there are no hindrances in WHO EMF committee. I don't know whether you're aware of that. Secondly, are you aware of the bombardment of EMF radiation by the Russians onto the American embassy in Moscow? This is also viral on the internet, and people have got affected.
Yeah, there are decades of published research and government research and industry research that shows biological effects to humans as well as to animals, and it's all there. But there was no pre-market testing for long-term safety before phones came on the market, before we started putting up all these towers, and there's not post-market surveillance, because if it were a drug and it had as many side effects are being reported, everything from headaches to cancer to immune damage,
disorders,
sleep problems, oxidative stress, it would be at least black. It would not just be black box. It would be banned. They would take it down and say, well, hold on, we got to see what's going on here. But instead, because it got into no accountability at least in the United States, we don't have an agency that is properly regulating it. The FCC is only maintaining the regulations at play. The FDA is saying, well, we're not going to act unless it's proven to be harmful, and then how they're deciding that. The transparency issues are important. I mean, we've been writing them, we've been asking them about this. And just so you know, what Dr. Davis talked about earlier, cell phones, when touching the body, exceed the FCC limits that are in place, the regulatory limits that phones have to pass before they go on the market. We know that at body contact, that's exceeded by the French government test.
Recently, I read that PhoneGate also.
PhoneGate is what it is called, and there have been hundreds of tests that were done in France, of which none of the public was aware, not in France, not in the United States, not anywhere, until that was revealed through a report by the French ANSES, which is kind of like the FDA of France, and Dr. Marc Arazi petitioned in court to have the French government release these tests when he read that, look, 9 out of 10 phones exceed European regulatory values when tested at body contact, but where are the tests? They're all posted online. You can go onto our website and search PhoneGate, and you can see the link to the ANFR, which is the French government testing agency, and there's all these tests. There's Apple, the Apple iPhone 5, there's Motorola, just every phone that they tested, hundreds of phones. There are test reports. They tested the phone at, touching the body phantom, and then at 5 millimeters distance and at 10 millimeters distance. And the values, most of them exceed the limits that are allowable. So I wrote to the FDA about this, and the FDA wrote back that there was a safety factor. And when I asked, well, what's the safety factor? Are you saying that it's okay to exceed the regulatory limits? And if so, where's the threshold where the FDA is going to be triggered? I haven't gotten an answer on that, but with the National Toxicology Program results, we know there is no safety. There's many reasons why we know there is no safety factor, but we really also have a similar situation with accountability. In the United States, the ear is considered an extremity. So when phones are tested in head, like as if it's up against the head, the ear is not included in that, and it's considered a pinna and allowed to absorb much higher levels of radiofrequency radiation. Same with the hands and the feet. The problem is that, of course, people hold cell phones in a lot of ways. They don't just hold it exactly 6 millimeters from their head at a certain tilt. They
stick it to the ear, like this, and for hours in India.
Yeah, and sometimes they rest it here, or they might tuck it.
What happens is that all this portion gets heated up.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had a doctor, Divya Prabhat, who has had many cases of hearing loss and also glaucoma here.
Mm-hmm. The work that the scientists in India have done on hearing loss is very important. And actually, we have some of those studies up on there's a page under the science tab at ehtrust.org. And if you click on research on radiofrequency radiation and you scroll down to hearing loss, we have some of those links. And I think there's some new research as well showing hearing loss from cell phones.
Right.
Yeah, and this isn't about the sound. This is about damage in the hearing.
In India, there are lady lawyers, lady doctors, sometimes having two phones. Mm-hmm. One in their front pocket, one in the hip. Mm-hmm. And I have cautioned them that there has been an exponential increase in PCOS and PCOD, which is polycystic ovarian disease, and polycystic ovarian disease is harmful to the mother to be. So these are a few cases, but leave alone all this, that there is harm is no doubt. Mm-hmm. The industry does not want to accept it like the tobacco industry, but gradually they will have to accept it. First they said smoking is very good, then Marilyn Monroe advertised and whatnot. Then they said no, smoking is harmful to your health. Then they come up with smoking kills now, and with very, very bad, ugly photographs of the cancers. Then there are phones by themselves. Why do the phone manufacturers write that please keep the phone away 5 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 25 millimeter away? Why? Why do they say use more text and less on the voice? So, is this because of the implications they can have with some people filing suits on them? Like there are 4 federal cases in Washington going on for these 14 cases. And what is happening to that? People are just getting dates and dates and dates and late and late and late.
Those court cases have been consolidated and are dragging on and on. Yep.
But who is responsible for dragging it on? Why can't the citizens of America take it up with the government, with the court, that you all are delaying it and we are dying? Nobody cares if a few hundred die or a few thousand die. And this is what we have told, even our Honorable Prime Minister has mentioned, that 65% of the population of India is below 35. Now, if something happens in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, to these youth, what will happen to the Indian industry, Indian economy? Who will be responsible to bail the cat? Nobody at that time. Neither the industry nor the government, because the government will change every 5 years.
These are the critical questions, and I think what we need to be thinking about. I mean, I think about in hospitals right now in the United States, they're putting transmitters everywhere. The workers all have transmitters, everything from the orderlies who are bringing people water and food, who might have 2 or 3 things clipped all to them, and then to the doctors that are using cell phones actively in hospitals. And I wonder, when people are sick, and even if it were a small rise, let's say in brain cancer, which I think there's evidence for more than just brain cancer, and a doubling to 5 times the risk, who will be taking care? I mean, this is going to be, because our doctors are exposed as well to this, and what will be in places where they don't have access to health care, and communities where there's not the kind of health care we have in the United States.
Let me give you another viewpoint from the doctor's viewpoint. They say that if we don't have the mobile phone next to us,
look at that.
If the patients are contacting us, how will they contact? Now, is there any answer? I said very simple. Transfer your mobile phone to the landline of specially dedicated landline in your office at the hospital.
Right.
Why have these radiation problems going all around the hospital? But the hospitals have Wi-Fi hotspots. So right next to the rooms or the intensive care units, you have a Wi-Fi unit. Now,
in the maternity wards.
Maternity wards everywhere.
That's right. Look at this one.
Yeah.
So, I would also say they also are piping in antennas from like Verizon and all the cell phone providers. So we have access points for wireless for various networks. When I was in the hospital a few weeks ago, there were multiple transmitters in the hallway of the hospital where I was supposed to be healing. And not to mention on the IV in intensive care, it was wireless and it was transmitting to my family member. And then I asked the nurse, I said, well, are you wirelessly connecting with this IV? And she said, oh no, it's broken. I mean, I don't communicate with it. We don't even use that, but yet it was still emitting, directly exposing the patients. And there's just so much work to do. Yeah.
Also, we have now got Wi-Fi hotspots all over Bombay city, which is also a problem which people are not aware.
They're not aware. People are
This
not
is
aware.
high technology.
Talk
The
to them.
poor people, what do they do with their smartphones is they watch movies, they see porn. Is that why we have given 4G and smartphones to the poor people? Is that called empowerment of the poor? I asked my Prime Minister. This is not correct. Anyway, life will go on and we will continue to fight this battle. You see, as they say, that a battle will be lost by us, a battle will be lost by them. But the real thing will be that the war on health will be lost by all. And we will not be able to recover that. So that's what my point is.
So that's why you continue to do this work. You're raising awareness across India to both elected officials and to communities, and you can go online and check out videos of protests that have taken place, of speeches, of presentations. I know that you also do interviews with people on YouTube, and I need to add that to our page. We have a web page all about India and everything that's going on. I see a question here. How can children protect themselves when they have Wi-Fi that require them to be working on iPads and Chromebooks daily? And I would say Environmental Health Trust has been working on this. We recommend that schools invest in the health of the students, the teachers, and the staff by using wired connections, which are possible. So we're connected with a wire, and I don't want to unplug it or I'll unplug you, but we have an adapter on the computer I'm using, and you can plug in an Ethernet. Here, I'll get an example of one.
The same thing holds good even in India. We are recommending wired lines wherever there are computer classrooms of 20 computers all on Wi-Fi. We have recommended, and some of the schools have changed to wired lines. And wired lines are far more safe than Wi-Fi, especially for children in schools.
So this is an adapter that connects to the computer that I have. And if you can see, the end is like that. So you just plug the Ethernet, which plugs into the modem, like that. And then you would plug this into the modem, or I don't know if it's called a router, a port. It's called a port, what we have, so you can have many people hooked up at one time. There are schools in the United States that have removed Wi-Fi, and we have a web page on ehtrust.org that you can go on and see the current list. And if you know of a school, please email us. We will add it to our list. Certainly around the world,
even in Europe, they have banned Wi-Fi in schools.
Well, in some countries, in elementary school, like Cyprus, in elementary schools, France has the Wi-Fi turned off, so the default is off, the default position, and only turned on if teachers are specifically using a curriculum where they need the internet connections, but they are hardwiring. And actually there's a lot on our website. If you also go to where it says Wi-Fi in schools video, you can see examples of schools where they have removed Wi-Fi and how they've done it. I mean, you can run strips along the walls where children can plug in. And I think there's also a really important conversation that needs to be had about how much we're using technology in schools. I support technology in schools, but I don't support every class using a computer all the time without us really looking at engaging the whole body of the child, especially in the younger grades, like kindergarten. We don't need, anyway, I won't go down this whole road right now, except to say that technology can be used safely. It's an important tool. And
Yes.
schools are really important because I think I heard from in Montgomery County, they have an access point, sometimes 2 access points in every room. That's exposing kids to radiation all the time, even when they're not on the computers.
Right.
And that's unnecessary radiation to have that always be radiating. So we need to think about how to, talk to your school board, talk to your parents and community leaders about getting wired connections in schools. Children spend most of their time in school and at home connect with wires, and that's certainly easy to do for some people, and for other people who maybe are in apartments where it comes with Wi-Fi. That's why it's really important to be working at the policy end so that everyone has an option for wired internet connection.
We also recommend that Wi-Fi routers should not be in the bedroom. It should be far away from the bedroom. You can charge your phone at night outside your room or put it on airplane mode.
Always.
So there is no radiation.
Mm-hmm.
There are children, especially teenagers, who like to have it sleeping with them so that they can get up early morning and go to college or not miss a phone call from their girlfriend or boyfriend.
Mm.
But that is secondary. Primary thing is that we have to protect the health of our children.
Mm-hmm. That's the most important. With health is the most
and
important.
And parents have to take an important role in seeing to it that these measures are adhered to by their children.
Which starts with education early, and also having, teaching in the school setting how to use technology in the safest ways. Oh yes, importantly. So the American Academy of Pediatrics in the United States has issued recommendations on how to reduce exposure to cell phone, and very specifically recommends reducing exposure to children, and how to keep the phone away from your body, not to store it in your pocket. One of the important things they say, like about laptops or iPads, is that if you want to get a program and you want your child to use a program, and let's say you're not near a wire and you can't plug in for some reason, have that downloaded on the device first rather than stream it. Because like you were talking, streaming is a much higher radiation. So it's better to have it already preloaded on your device, and then your child can watch it. And always, even if make sure the Wi-Fi is off and it's on airplane mode, and let's say you're watching something, don't have it on the child's lap, because they also emit electromagnetic fields, ELF. So you always want your electronics on a table, Wi-Fi off or Wi-Fi on, not directly touching your body, which is also very important to note.
One interesting thing which I would like to share with you all is that antennae, example which I gave earlier of 5 antennae at 7 meters, we reduced the radiation level by more than 95% with a 10-foot high stainless steel mosquito net grill. So the metal either reflects it or reduces the radiation. A similar example would be if you take a mobile phone and cover it up with aluminum foil, you will not be able to reach it because that aluminum foil absorbs all the radiation.
So there are ways that shielding. What's really important, I would add, is that whenever there's shielding that's done, to have someone be measuring what's happening on any side of the shielding, an expert in electromagnetic radiation, because you might be, and you have a picture that you placed on Facebook.
That's right.
Of major antennas on a rooftop, a screen, and a person sitting here.
That's right.
I would say just make sure that you're not you're reflecting that back there, but you always want to be sure that you're not catching something else. So it's, and the real issue is, why isn't why isn't our government taking time to help people with this? Because how is it that on a rooftop there's antennas and then there's chairs? I mean,
unless and until there is a follow-up, continuous follow-up with the politicians, with the local bodies, nothing moves in our country.
And you have been doing follow-up.
Yes, we help them to follow up. There are lawyers who are there. There's so much other people who are really helping us. And the best help we get is from the media, both from the electronic and from the print media.
I noticed there are a lot of articles, and on your Facebook page, you will often post these articles, and I've been trying to catch them and bring them onto EHT so that we can pass on that work. I mean,
how is the support from media in USA for you?
You know, I would say that it's both challenging and it's been quite impressive all at the same time. I would like to see, and have not seen, our major newspapers covering this more. And that is a real issue, because on the one hand, this is a complicated issue. On the other hand, it's not so complicated. There's no pre-market testing. There's research that shows harm. It can be covered.
Right.
On the other hand, I think sometimes our journalists get both confused, and there are times where they're not working on this issue, and I wonder why. And I would say this: The Nation. Did you see the article in The Nation, the investigative report?
Right.
Talking about how
Very
industry influence into wireless, and that is an important piece of this story that goes along with the what does the science say? Then there's how is industry involved in how the science is presented. I mean, why do we have newspaper articles that then change within one day of going up? Or how do some articles just disappear?
Right.
So
there are TV channels in India and also newspapers which are owned indirectly or directly by these people, the service providers. And there we have problems.
Yes.
Sometimes what they do is we will stop our advertisements in your paper.
That's right.
Now, such kind of tactics, we cannot really help. We can't help ourselves with this unless and until we are 100% supportive and they support us. Otherwise, we have to go to the streets one day.
I think it's coming to that in some ways because there are many articles, and Environmental Health Trust tries to keep up, but we can't keep up with the false information that's actually being posted in the press at times. And, you know, it's so important because it's interesting that people often will say, like, they won't believe something unless it's in press by a journalist who actually doesn't even know the issue.
Right. He doesn't know anything.
Right. And when we have very respected, distinguished doctors talking on this, they might get one line, and there needs to be a full airing of this issue in every government where all voices can be heard on this, and that hasn't happened yet.
We have created also awareness with banners.
Oh yeah, your banners.
And placards in the protests, which I have seen also over here in America at certain places where children are holding these placards. But our banners really did the trick in 2011 when 13 towers were removed from opposite Juhi Chawla's house. After she tried for almost 12 to 18 months, she could not succeed. But then we changed our strategy and we were able to achieve.
So you're talking about, we can look right at the camera.
Any other questions?
Well, I just want to point out, you're talking about banners that were placed on the apartment building facing the antennas.
Correct.
And they said things like,
chemotherapy, who will pay for the costly chemotherapy, if I get cancer, it affects you and me. The Indian norms are very high. The German building biology says 0.001. We were at 1,000 at that time. So various things were touched upon, and we touched the heart rather than the brains. And that's how we succeeded.
So you had those signs up on your apartment building that everyone could see. And then, am I right that dozens of antennas were taken down eventually?
Yes. And then we had to find a Right to Information Act. There is an RTI Act. We had to file the application to the government saying that, are these legal? Are all these 14 towers legal?
14 towers across from your flat.
Exactly. Mine in Juhi and my estate just 5 meters away. So 14 towers, are they all legal? So one had to go to and do investigative journalism. One had to go to the offices of these people. So unless and until there was perseverance and follow-up, nothing can be achieved in India or anywhere else.
Or anywhere else, that's right.
Yeah. So then the person told me, yes, Mr. Munshi, there is only one tower which is sanctioned, 13 are illegal on a government building. And then they were served a notice to remove that within 7 days.
So on a government building, all of these towers were illegal, but one. And there were dozens of antennas. Were there not 40 antennas that were on top of this building, and you were able to get all of them down except for the one legal one?
Right.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Actually, we have, like in Maryland, in some of our streets, there are applications for mini antennas to be put up. They're not even put up where they say they're going to be put up. They're put up in other places. They're put up higher than they need to be. It's just sounds like this is a nationwide issue.
And we have also now a directive that all government buildings can put up the antenna.
Oh, really? Oh, then look at the cameras.
But all government buildings can put up the antenna, but there should be a rider as per the DOT regulations. They can't put up anywhere right outside my window. So that is another thing.
Oh.
Which is not really good for us. Then we have court cases going on where the petitioners have said you cannot put up antennae or tower in open spaces like gardens where children are playing, where citizens or senior citizens are sitting there in the evenings or mornings. So there is a stay order from the High Court which says, okay, you're not permitted to do that.
Wow.
But still, there are some cellular operators and service providers, infrastructure providers, go ahead and install it.
Even when it's illegal?
When there is, it's actually contempt of court.
Wow.
But who is there to control it? Nobody has the time. Nobody has the real time to do all this. And the money, because you have to pay the lawyers' fees. This is the problem in India.
Right. Right. Well, in the United States, our parks are actively, that is where cell towers and cell antennas are being proposed to be put all across the United States. In our parks, a place where kids play soccer and football, that's what's happening. And if people are organized, they're able to call for responsible placement, which is not in parks or near homes. But that's a big issue.
I have also read about these Deborah, watch that wire.
So we got wires here. We're running wires.
There is also the issue of these fire brigade people. I have read where they were saying about the protest of fire. I think this is all what I have for the time being.
Yeah.
And I'll be glad to talk to you and your people in America via Skype if required. Thank you very much, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk to you all and to the citizens of America.
And let me add before we close that it is very interesting to note that Palm Beach County managed under Florida state law to exempt itself from any 5G antennas or towers. Now, the grounds for this were probably chiefly aesthetic because it is one of the most exquisitely beautiful places in America. But it also may have something to do with the fact that it's one of the richest counties in America. And we have to ask ourselves, if the firefighters of California and the wealthy citizens of Palm Beach County can be exempt from the siting of these towers, then it's time for us to take a step back and see whether or not we can do a better job of understanding this technology before we introduce it.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, the history of public health is full of examples. It's full of examples where we introduce technology, whether it's asbestos or we introduce habits like tobacco, and only after the evidence was undeniable that people were literally dying were steps taken to reduce those technologies or experiences. I would think that every parent and grandparent out there shares with Environmental Health Trust our concern that we need to ask, what are we doing to ourselves and our children before we continue to expand a technology that the National Toxicology Program has now identified that there is clear evidence of causing cancer at exposures in animals that are like the exposure that a human can get in their lifetime in the 2 years of those animals' lifetimes. I salute my colleagues at the National Toxicology Program for the superb work that they have done in carrying out the scientific investigation, and we look forward to their final report that should be released this year, despite much and unprecedented review. On behalf of Environmental Health Trust, I want to thank Theodora Scarato most sincerely for her work and urge all of you to please look at Facebook. Look for this will be posted on YouTube, and we will also be putting up additional information as it becomes available from the federal government and other sources of research. Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.